Good evening, how are we this evening? It's Wednesday, it's 7 o'clock, which means it's my Facebook Live, and I have got 3 new sets of embossing powders to show you, and lots, ta-da, list of 10 different techniques to do with them. They are all on the website. Apologies, Paul is out and about, so there's no image for them, but I have said what the sets are. The new sets are Clearly Creative, which are all clear based embossing powders, but don't think they're just clear. We have Silver Satin Pearl, Red Pearl, Holographic, Matte Clear, and Silver Crystal. So although that looks silver, the embossing powder within it is clear. So they're Clearly Creative. Then we have the opaque set. So these are just opaque colours. So we have ruby, jade, sapphire, amethyst and pink. I couldn't think of a gemmy colour for that one. Right, who have we got? Evening Jack, Evening Maxine, hi Sue, hi Elsbeth. So right, so that was opaques. And then last but not least is our essentials, which includes verdigris, gold, black, silver and copper, and these are all really fine. So these are the ones that, you know, if you just want to do your normal stamping and embossing, this set is perfect. But if you want to do what we're doing tonight, which is messing about with embossing powder and pushing them to their limits, well, not to their limits, just messing about with them, the others work really nicely as well. They're 10ml pots, so you've got plenty in there to play with. Right, before I get too messy, I'm just going to grab some paper to put on the table so that I can tip stuff back in. But I needed to keep a mark there because I have zoomed the overhead camera in a bit. I might have gone too far in, but I just think for what we're doing is probably better if the camera's zoomed in a little bit. I can't change it while I'm on air, so to speak, because I have to climb on a ladder. So hopefully that is nicely zoomed in for you. Right, so embossing powders. We are going to be messing about with all of the different ones that we've got. So we'll just see what we can do. I am going to be using a clear pad a bit as well, and I have prepared some twinches already. So some have got some paper covered on them already, just so that you're not seeing me cover them with paper. Right, hi Carol, I think you'll like this sort of stuff we're doing. Right, so the first one we're going to do is we're going to do a distress embossing. So I've got our Take a Leaf stencil, which fits over twinches really nicely. I think I'm going to go for that one, and I am going to, probably easier to do this with a sponge. I'm just going to get some embossing ink squidged into there. Okay, so be quite generous because we want to get it really, really squidged in. You could use a colour ink pad for this, but you do want it to be a pigment, especially as I'm going on to book page, which is quite sucky uppy. You really want to have a fairly sticky ink pad for that. Okay, and then we're going to come in with our black. So straight over the top with our black. Now, don't be afraid to tip the whole pot out. It doesn't matter, because we're only going to have what sticks to the ink that stays there. If I was using a paper that might, like a coated paper or something like that, that might hold my oils from my fingers a little bit better, you might want to do a anti-static bag first. And when I say an anti-static bag, what I mean is corn flour or talcum powder in the toe of a sock. Works just as well, or just dust it straight on, and then it means that the ink is the only thing that's going to grab the embossing powder. Right, so I'm working on board so that I'm going to have a little set of twinches at the end of this. So I am not worrying about heating from behind. Okay, I'm just going to start heating this black. And you can see that was definitely worth zooming in, wasn't it? You can see that start to turn. Okay, so just all over till you see it goes shiny, which obviously when we're using a clear matte later isn't what we're going to look for. Okay, you can see it's gone nice and shiny there, and we've got that lovely leaf. Let it cool down for a second. Now I'm trying really hard not to have the fan on at the side of me. So notice you can hear the clicking of it, but I might have to put it on in a minute because we'll see with the heat gun. So you can see that nice. And the reason I like this technique for a stencil is because I can now pop the stencil back over the top. Slots together nice and easily. This time I'm not going to put any more ink on my sponge because there is actually ink all over my stencil. So I'm not going to do all of it, I'm just going to pull in some of that ink just around the edges. You probably won't even be able to see it, but when I come in with, I think I'm going to go with copper. I come in with my copper and tip that on, and then tip that off. Can you see it's not got full coverage? It's not taken to that stem. I mean, this is quite small. When you do it with larger ones, you can be, but it's not got full coverage. It's just having a hint of it. And when you're using something like the copper and the black, it's just really nice. Sorry, I am going to have to put this fan on. I'm already melting. There we go. Oh, that's better. Much better. Right. So I'm going to melt this. It won't take as long because we've got that black underneath. But can you see the hints of the black coming through as well? And you get this beautiful distressed look. Tip it. And can you see here where it's just a little bit less shiny? That means I haven't melted it. So I'm going to come in and remelt that. And you get this fabulous sort of almost shadow, more texture to it. And if you wanted to, you could put it back on, let it cool. The more layers you do, the warmer your base becomes. Pop that back on, and I'm just going to do the very tips. And I'm actually now going to come in with a bit of gold as well. Let's get this autumnal feel going. My cherry tree thinks it's autumn, so because I went in can you see that I've only taken it to the very edges there, so the embossing powder isn't clinging to anything. Thank you, Sue, that's nice. Right, tip that back into there. If you've got any concerns about that there's contamination on there, don't tip it back into your main pot, tip it back into a little pot that you've got a sort of like a mixed pot. And we're just going to melt this again, and we're going to add some gold into here as well. And this is the advantage of using a stencil, because you can. I could have gone in with a colour, but I thought I might as well stick with one set to begin with. You see that gold melting in, and you get this lovely tonal look. Okay, so that's technique number one. Right, tick that off. Embossing on embossing is my next one. So for this, I am going to come in with another one with some interest in the background. Bit of Chinese newspaper, and it's been in a box for ages, so it's got a real sort of interest to it. Anyway, it's got a bit of patina, and I think I'm going to go. Let's stick with copper. I am a sucker for copper. Right, I want a stamp. I'm going to use one of the stamps from last week. If you missed out on last week's stamps and you are interested, message me, because I need to have a count up and see what I've got left, because I have got some left, but I can't remember off the top of my head, and it's been one of those weeks where I've been sort of trying to do 74 different jobs. But I've just packed Paul off to Wakefield, so. Okay, so just traditional stamping and embossing. Okay, nice and simple. There we go. Turn that down, would it? Oh, it's less noisy, but still cooling. Okay, so we're just going to heat this normally. And you can see how nice and fine details these are. I'm pleased with that zooming in, although my fingers do look massive. Quite chunky, but not that massive. Okay, so again, because I'm working on board, I'm not worrying about heating from behind because it would just take too long. So I'm just heating that lovely copper. You see, I just love the copper. Again, just double check. I don't think it's turned fully up there, so just give it a little bit just to make sure. Okay, and then we want this to cool down for a second. So wafty wafty, because we are going to glaze all over the top. Now we are going to glaze with the matte clear. So I am going to change my piece of paper because I do not want any contaminant in my clear. So hologram, red pearl. Is that the last one you pick up? Right, matte clear. So clear ink all over the top. Okay, and then come in with your, so it doesn't have to be matte clear, but I just think the matte clear is going to give a really different look. And then on with your powder. So this is going over everything. Okay, back into the pot. Now matte clear is a little bit different. We're not going to see it go shiny, but obviously with the clear ones, they look white when they're not melted, so you have that advantage. But you're just going to start to melt it, and you'll see it will also pick up the copper that is already there. And can you see it gives it that kind of Pears soap adverts in a frame where the water's got behind it or into the frame and sort of lifted the print away, and it starts to come away. It looks like it's coming away from the paper, but can you see how lovely that matte clear is? I can also see that I haven't done that corner there, so I'm just gonna, now I might do a second coat of this. When you're doing this technique, obviously you're also remelting that detailed stamp underneath. So when you start doing extra layers, just be aware that you could get that spreading too much, because what's happening there is the bottom layer is remelting, it's becoming a liquid, it's mixing with another liquid. So we will do one more layer. Hello Marsha. I think I've said hello to everybody. Laureen, sorry I missed you. Good evening. Good evening. How are we all? Can you believe we're at the end of July? Which you know what that means. That means I've got to start thinking about advent calendars. Stuff's already been put aside. I'll never know what's going on. Right. Okay, lid on that. So I've got to be careful this time because obviously the copper could melt too much. So just stick with one layer if you're happy. But if I move quite quickly and don't let it melt too much, I think that's gonna, yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm gonna stop at 2 layers. But look how nice that matte is. You see how different it looks. So although it has got a slight shine to it in the fact that you've put, it's not like next to that one. See how it's just got a really different feel, and I just think for a vintage look it is so lovely. It almost has, yeah, Christmas tree, it almost has a look of if you covered things in beeswax. So the matte clear, which is in the Clear Creative Care, didn't think that one through, did I? Clearly Creative set of embossing powders is a really unusual one. Okay, so next one, we're going to do the same idea of we're going to be mixing embossing powders. We're going to be stamping on and embossing. Right, so I'm going to go with a plain white Twinchy. Okay, generously inked, and then we're going to pick one of the colours. Let's go with Amethyst. I think this is going to show up. It does look like vellum, yes, it does. It just has such an unusual look for a clear embossing powder. Right, look at the colour of this. Okay. Now this is how I did the cat that's on my Facebook. What I'm doing now, but I'm just going to do it in purple. That one had, and the reason I can't fully do the cat, I might have to do it as a tutorial, is because I need to actually pop it into the freezer in between. Because what you do is after you've done your layers like I'm doing here, so got that nice purple going on there, but it's a bit thin because we're using thin or fine embossing powders. They put down a thin coat of embossing. When we use ultra thick, you get bigger, it has a higher surface tension. But we can still do lots of things with the fine embossing powder, but we just might have to do a couple more layers. So I have added more ink. Doesn't matter. I have heard someone say before that if you add more ink, your layers can slip off. I can say I've not had slippage like that before. Okay, so I'm going to do another layer of this amethyst. Okay. So you see it just going a little bit glassier, a little bit smoother. Okay. I think I am going to do a second coat. Now, because I've been working with this piece for a minute or so and heating it a couple of times, the board actually maintains a little bit of the heat. So when you're doing your third layer, the chances are you can get the powder on while it's still warm, and it will just cling to the dampness of the embossing powder as it sets. If it doesn't do that and you tip it off and it all comes off, no biggie. Tip it back into the, this is the problem that happens when you do that, is sometimes if you come in too fast, you see all that fly off. That doesn't happen when you're using, so just slow your heat gun down. But if it does all tip off, just ink it. It's no biggie. I've got glue. The other reason I panned out, I've zoomed in. So I've got some glue on the cutting mat there, and it's now got embossing powder in it. Right, happy with that. So on the cat one, when it was at this stage, I popped it in the freezer, and that was on card, not board. And then you leave it in there for about 10 minutes, and what happens is it goes brittle, and when it comes out you can actually crack it, and then you can rub ink into the cracks. But I'm actually going to fake that look a little bit, because I think if I come in with, I don't want to go, maybe black. If I apply some ink to the top of this with some screwed up paper, just found some. So it's not going to, let's see, this might fake some cracks. Oh yes, I think that's going to work. Or you pop it in the freezer and rub ink. But I think the black's going to be really cool. So obviously the black's from the Essentials, the amethyst, the lovely purple colour, is from the opaques. So I'm just going to melt this in. And if you let it melt in and sort of flow a little bit, I'm going to tip it in a second because it is getting a little bit of a, you see that. The other thing that's happening here is, although it's an opaque one, it doesn't have a clear base, it has a whiter base. So when you heat it a lot, what you can sometimes do is have this white coming through, which adds to that sort of crackly, interesting look. Okay, so we could just heat that a little bit more, get a little bit more of that white coming through. So just, I'm going to tilt my heat gun so that you can see. So as you heat it, it's just pulling out. The pigment is sort of moving and you're getting this lovely sort of really interesting marbly look. Okay, happy with that. Let that cool down. The fridge, right. Okay, so once you're at this stage, you take your piece of embossing and you pop it in the freezer for about 10 minutes. Then when you come out, you can't do it when it's on board. This is when it's on normal card. When it comes out, it will be really, really brittle, and you just bend it like that and you hear it crack. And then you can rub ink in and highlight the cracks. Right, so that's cooled down a bit now. Did I say about the embossing, if you order the embossing powder you get a free stamp? Did I say that? First 10 people to order the embossing powders will get a free stamp. Right. I'm going to make my life easier. So I've inked that up. I'm now going to just press my embossing onto that. Okay, so it should have picked up some ink. I'm now going to come in with my gold across the top. Can you see the embossing powder is sticking to where I pressed the stamp? And now I'm going to melt that into the purple. It will turn quite quickly. A little thing about metallic embossing powders. General rule of thumb, if they look yucky in the pot, they usually melt to be the most delicious metallics. Okay, so that is embossing on top of embossing. Embossing under embossing, embossing on top of embossing. Right, 1, 2, 3. That's 3 done. Okay, next one just says verdigris. Embossing on embossing both ways. Right. This is one I did earlier. Okay, but while I was doing that, I did this one at the same time. And what I did, but I haven't heat set this, is I took my square and I rubbed glue on it and used that to hold the embossing powder in place, because what I want is I want it to have a little bit more texture. So by using glue instead of ink, it has more texture. But I have let this one dry because so it might not bubble up quite as well, but it might do. I don't know. But I just thought, because if I do it when it's wet, when the glue's wet, it takes ages for the embossing powder to melt. Whereas when you do it and the glue's already dry, you see it turns a lot quicker. But can you see the fabulousness? And it is bubbling. Can you see that bubbling? This is why I zoom the camera in. Because the glue, there you go, get that bubble going. And then that just gives your embossing even more texture. I'm just going to get that going a little bit more around the edge. Now what's great about verdigris is it is made up, it's quite warm still, of different colours. You've got gold in there, you've got green, so you get this fabulous antique-y look. Okay, they're just, and the more you heat it, the more the metallic. So you see this one, how the gold is more textured and more spread out. The more you heat verdigris, the better it becomes. If you just heat it until it's melted, it's never as interesting as it could be. So I'm doing down this side. Can you see that the gold is spreading more? Because basically metallic embossing powders take a little bit longer to melt. So if you just go till the green is gone, your gold has not spread out enough and you don't get quite as nice verdigris effect. Okay, so that's verdigris. That's quite warm still. Okay, right. You two will be getting lines if you're late again. Okay, bit of baking parchment because I don't want this to stick. Let's play with a skeleton leaf. This is one of my favourite things to do with skeleton leaves, because obviously anybody that knows me knows I do love a skeleton leaf, but sometimes they're just a little bit boring. So how can we spruce up a skeleton leaf? Well, let's add some embossing to it. So I'm going to start playing with the pearls from the Clearly Creative ones. So this is the silver one. And by using baking parchment underneath, you could use a Teflon sheet. Now I am going to get quite a bit of embossing powder probably sticking to my baking parchment because I squeezed my ink through the leaf onto it. That's just not too bad. Now, the reason we're working on baking parchment and not just our paper is obviously it's a skeleton leaf, so it is quite holy, which means that the embossing powder can flow through the holes and make it stick. Okay, and we don't want it to stick. So by working on baking parchment, it means that I can peel it off. Okay, and see how you've got, this is really good for Christmas because look how fabulous and frosty that now looks. But you could, if you wanted to, just, a bit like we did earlier, just touch a little bit more onto that. Let's bring in the red pearl. Let's give it a real sort of autumnal. Thing is with these pearl ones is they do look a little bit boring to begin with because they just look like normal clear, but trust me, they're not. And if you use them onto black card or paper, as we will do in a minute, okay, these do become a little bit brittle when you use them. Can you see that pearl? That hint of red. Just keep going gently with it. And it's a second coat, so it will never take as long to melt. If you find it is sticking to your paper, warm it and then peel it away. Don't try and rip it off because it will tear your... Oh, right. Top tip, put your lids back on before you knock them over. You will have to come to class as a punishment, Maria, you're absolutely right. See me afterwards. Isn't that just beautiful? And what I thought I was going to do with this one is actually cut it, stick it on as a square there, so that's what I'm going to do. But somebody, not naming who, seems to have put purple embossing powder into their glue. Don't know how that happened. So let me see if I can get some that hasn't got purple embossing powder on, because I don't really want any purple. So this is covered with our faux rice paper we did. I'm just going to stick that down like that. And then I'm going to trim off the excess leaf. Obviously not waste that. That would be fabulous in a waste not, want not. Just trim that off. And then we've got that beautiful autumnal. I mean, we're getting quite a nice sort of autumnally feel going on there. But it's a really nice way of sprucing up your skeleton leaves. And we've all got them lurking. Right, skeleton leaf. Next one is just says salt. Good job I know what my notes mean. So, is my salt. Let's go, I think we'll go gold first. Or do we go black first? Let's go black first, actually. You'll have to do lines, yes, you will have to do lines. But can you do them each one in a different embossing technique? So just get the black back in the pot. I'm going to do one coat of black. Then I think I'm going to do a layer of gold. Then I think I'm going to do a layer of copper, just to give me some real interest in this. I know I'm whacking my heat gun on full every time here. I better get a wiggle on if I'm going to get 10 done, as it's half. Oh no, actually it's half past. I've done 5, so I'm on target. Woohoo! Did think 10 was ambitious. Right, so just going to get this. So, one coat of black. Okay, let it cool down. I'm not going to try and, though it is still quite warm. Trouble is, if you try the inking technique and your embossing powder isn't fully set, what happens is it sticks to your embossing pad, and you don't want that. And you can see, actually, I am going to do a layer of gold with, it's probably not going to stick at all, but a little bit. It's just I was aware that the black was just sticking to my finger a tiny bit. That's what you have to be really careful with embossing, because it does sit at quite a high temperature. We're not talking melted glass temperatures, so those of us that work with glass, embossing powder's nothing. I mean, it is nice having a bit of gold in there. I just want to get some sort of a bit of a mix, and then I'm going to come in with some copper as well. I have got silver there as well. Right, it's about right. Tip that back in the pot. Get that one melted down as well. Okay, and I want to get this nicely flowing, because for 2 reasons. One, you get that lovely mottling, and that comes about because we have mixed our colours. Or you're using, if you've got a mica based embossing powder, it will do that. So just get it nice and molten. Oh, and then while it's molten, we tip some salt on. Possibly a little bit too much there, but that was quite difficult to do one-handed. Right, and then just leave that to cool down with the salt on. I will be throwing some of that over my shoulder, but most of it is going in the bin there, because I don't think Paul would appreciate if I put it back in his salt pot for his chips. Because I couldn't find my craft one, so I did grab his one for his chips. Copper embossing powder is just fabulous. Right, so leave that to cool, and then when it's cool, you rub out the salt. Okay, leave it to cool, and don't know if you can see, but you get these lovely dimples in it. You can also mix salt in with your embossing powder as well, and because the salt doesn't melt, you get a fabulous texture to things. Really lovely. So just once it's cool, just go in. You see how you get that fabulous, almost like cast iron rusty look. And if you mix mica with your salt as well, you get, wow, real fabulous. But just doesn't that look like it's proper? If the white of the salt is bothering you, just dissolve it with a little bit of water, literally wash it away, because it's salt. So the white's gone and you just get this fabulous texture that's like nothing else. Right, so that's that one done. Yeah, honestly, messing about with different colours of embossing powder is so much fun. A skeleton leaf, salt, colours on black. We've done a little bit of that, but I think we'll play with the opaque colours. So I'm just going to get some black going. When you're putting your lids on, screw your lids on so that when you pick them up, you pick up. Where's my black gone? How have I? Gold, copper, silver, verdigris, blue. How have I managed to lose my black embossing powder in that short space of time? 5, 5. There it is. It's by the salt. Of course it is. Right. So I'm going to do this one quite quickly because we've seen a little bit of this effect. So just get the black melted down. And we want a fairly good coating of it. So I'm going to do a couple of layers, possibly 3. Because the thicker the layers are, the more fun you can have with it because there's more to melt into. So we know that the black stays hot for longer. You will get to know which powders melt quicker, which ones take longer to cool down. They are all different, and it will be because of how they are coloured, whether they're a pigment, whether they're a mica, whether it's got a clear base, whether it's got a opaque base, a white base, and you get to know your powders. Don't be afraid to experiment with them. They are designed to melt. Officially they are called thermographic. They are from the print industry. So you know when you're reading it used to be, they do spot lamination now with UV, but it used to be if you had a shiny bit, that would be clear embossing powder. But now say it's all spot lamination. I mean, don't do what I do and whack the heat gun up so fast that your powder. Although I do like that effect, and I am tempted to heat it and right. See if I can get some of that back in. Okay. Ooh, it's warm. Just be careful. So, just be careful because it does get really warm, especially around the edges. Okay, so that's nicely melted. I'm going to swap that out for a clean bit of paper, just because it's a bit ugly. And we know that those pieces of paper will get used for something. Right, lid on the black. I am going to put a little bit of ink on here. See, the black does stay hot for longer. That's what happens when you touch and it's still warm. Fortunately, it didn't lift off onto there. Right. Let's come in with some of these opaque colours. Now, I'm not planning on tipping this back in because I'm going to be mixing my colours. So I am opening the pot and I am just doing it like you would for salt. Hazel. Late again. Are you all right though, Hazel? Right, a bit of the ruby. I know you can't see much and the fan's not helping here. So I'm just doing little pinches. Bit of that jade. It's always nice to have black in the background of these. And I'm holding on to the pink at the moment. I'll do the pink in a minute. Right, slowly, because the ink might have dried in that time. And just move it round. Don't know how well the different colours are showing up, but you're getting almost like a galaxy look. and you can leave it just sparkly, like sprinkly like that. Or you saw what I did earlier with the gold and the copper. If we whack the heat up and get this really flowing, we can push the colours about, get it flowing. You see those start to flow, and you can see, push the waves across and let the colours, it's almost like marbling. And this is when you can do really nice sort of galaxies and things like that. I'm going to throw a bit of pink in as well, because obviously pink being pale. There we go. Let's just melt that in. That shouldn't take long. It'll probably have started to melt as it hit it. What I love about embossing powders is, again, they are very forgiving, because if you think that's too much, sprinkle some more black in. The pink really pops. It's got that lovely sort of galaxy feel. So if you've got a nice stamp, you can press that into it, but I just love that background. Right, okay, so that's messing about with mixing your colours. Colours on black. Right, this one says very, sounds boring. It says traditional triple embossing. So let's go for it. And what colour should we play with? Let's do sapphire. I don't think we've really used that much. I think that might be quite nice. So we're going to get 3 coats going here quickly. And traditionally this is called triple embossing because you do 3 layers, because 3 layers will give you a nice coating, because we're looking for a smooth, glassy, no dints in it. Okay. Really. And again, traditionally people would do the throw the powder on, but if you're not comfortable doing that, don't, because I've seen so many people burn themselves or knock their embossing powder everywhere because you're rushing to get the pot, and you turn your heat gun on too soon, or so just, if in doubt, ink between. Okay. You can see how much quicker it melts the second time. Now you see how you're getting those little blobs there? Although it's melted, you actually need to continue melting it. You want it to relax out. Ultra thick embossing powder does that a lot. It sort of curls into little balls, so you want to just heat it further and let it relax back out. Okay, one more coat. It is a beautiful blue. Again, it's quite an unusual colour for an embossing powder, and I think it's nice to use different ones and mess about with them onto black and stuff like that. Oop. How are we finding the more zoomed in view? It's better for my eyesight. If I can't see what I'm doing, I look at it on the monitor, it's bigger. It's like having my glasses on. Right, so here we go. Just get that melted down. There we go. So we want it fairly evenly melted, and we'll come back to that in a second. In the meantime, we are going to grab a stamp. I'm going to use one, and I'm not going to put it on a block. By all means, you do it with a block, because we're going to be pressing into the embossing powder. You can just ink it up with an embossing ink. You can ink it up with a colour. You can ink it up and dust it with some mica. I'm just inking it up just to show. Right, so get your stamp in your hand, okay? And then start to warm your square or whatever you're doing. For this technique, I wouldn't try and do this over a large area. It's just trying to keep it warm. Okay, so just keep heating it. And if you're using a colour, it is a little bit easier because you can see when it starts to move about. Okay. Also, if you're doing this for the first time, just ink up with clear ink, because if you do mess it up, which inevitably you will because there's a lot to think about with this technique, you can just reheat it and nobody will know. Right. You then take your stamp and you just lay it on top and press down gently. Instinct is to press down really, really firmly. But actually, you've got to remember you're pressing into a liquid. So if you press too firmly, all that's going to happen is it's all just going to squish straight off. And then you want to count to 10 or 30. Depends how warm everything is. Because what we want to then be able to do is peel our stamp out. Now the sapphire has this white base I was talking about, so actually look how fabulous that looks, and what you've got is this beautiful indentation. Now say for example you pressed it in and you hadn't pressed firm enough there, you can just reheat this and do it again, but let me show you. So just reheat it. You can add more powder if you want, especially if you've pushed it off the side a little bit there. Okay, so I am going to add a bit more powder to that because where I've pressed in, and you might want to re-ink your stamp as well, okay, because your embossing powder may have grabbed the ink. It will have done. In fact, if you look at the stamp, you can see that it's not sticky there. So always re-ink your stamp because you don't... You found me. Hello, Lucy. You found us. Right, so just ink that up. Let's get this going again. So, getting it melting down. Stamp ready. But if you think it's cooled down too much, just reheat it. So get it melting down. I love this sapphire. With the white bases in them, you can have so much fun. I'll try and move that more to the middle. There we go. Okay. And then just press your stamp in. Not too firmly, but enough. It is, honestly, it's beautiful. And then when you get the white coming through, it is such an interesting colour. Okay, so traditional black gesso. See, I'm waiting for that to be a little bit longer because it is quite warm. And just look at that. And if you, because obviously, because it's a liquid, it will flow off the sides a little bit there. But you can, if you want it to be perfectly square, you can trim it down, or you can leave those pieces. And these bits there, you can either just remelt or put them between some baking parchment and iron them and they will melt, or put them into your fusible film and stuff like that. Once it's cool, you can brush this with your gilding waxes and stuff like that. You know, you can just have so much fun with that. So that's traditional triple embossing, but not with traditional colours. Right, I've got my black gesso. Okay. So according to this, I've got 2 more techniques to do. So I'll be quick with this one. So black gesso. can, I'm doing it really sort of haphazardy, little bit of texture there. Should have done the next one first. I'm sorry, Carol, but this is definitely your kind of stuff. Right, let's go gold. Actually, let's do silver, because we haven't done the silver much. Remember what I said, if it looks rubbish coming out of the pot, it'll be a fabulous. Right. So we have used our gesso instead of our ink. It is thicker. It has more body to it. It will hold your embossing powder way better than any ink, but it will also give texture, especially if you put it on fairly thick. So it will take a little bit longer to turn because we are also drying that paint. But can you see, as the paint is drying, it is bubbling up and letting out the moisture. And then what happens is the embossing powder grabs and sets around it, and you get such a fabulous texture to it. Okay, I'm going to come in with the satin silver pearl on top of that now, I think. And I am going to use more gesso because it's just going to mix in and create so much more interest than just ink and powder. Don't do this with all paints, because obviously some of them, like oils and stuff, have a solvent in them which will give off nasty fumes. Water-based ones like gesso and stuff like that is fine. Look how lovely this pearl silver is. It's got such a nice tone against the silver there. And then I think I want to throw in some verdigris, or shall we throw in a bit of copper to give it a rusty feel? Let's go, what's that called? A bit more gesso. Let's sprinkle in a tiny bit of copper. A tiny bit of the jade, just a tiny little hint, and then I think I'm going to go with a bit more gold. Don't know how this is going to come out, but hey, that's half the fun. So just keep an eye, make sure things are melting evenly. I don't think I sprinkled much jade in there. I don't know. But look at the texture and on that. I mean, that just looks so old and rusty. You see what's going on here? And I've been kept swapping my papers out so that it's not so muddy in the background. But when I'm working at home, I keep working on the same piece, because what you get is this sort of this kind of feel underneath, and you just then you've got this fabulous thing to cut up. But yeah, so that is using gesso instead of ink. I mean, that just looks like rust. It's fabulous. Okay. And all this powder that's on the table here, if you sweep that up, and that's a stamp gone on the floor, and then just pile it up in the middle, it's brilliant. Okay, last technique. I think that gesso, rust, yep. Last technique is this one. Right, I'm gonna have to work on a bit of brown paper, that'll do. Trusty kitchen towel. Not my favourite one for this technique because it's got the blue dimples in it. So if you can get the cheaper one, that doesn't have fancy blue dimples, that's even better. Okay, let's just get some ink down there, and we're going to go with the red pearl, I think. And we're just going to cover it with our powder. Okay. If you use coloured ink for this, it looks fab as well. But I just carried on with my clear. Okay, so a bit like when we're doing the skeleton leaf, just be aware that the embossing powder will want to flow through this. I saw my awl a minute ago, because it will flap. I think this makes really good journal covers and stuff, this. So just let it melt. So the blue design's a little bit annoying, but it's the only kitchen towel I had. But look how nice the red pearl looks on the craft paper. So get this going. Okay. Get that nicely melted. And what you'll notice, again, same rule as with the skeleton leaf. If it sticks, warm it up and peel it. Okay, let it cool down. Then we're going to flick it over and we're going to do the other side. Now this is where it's going to get slightly trickier, because obviously as we do the second side, the first side is going to remelt. You can stalk away. Oh, that's a different one. That's the silver. I want the red again. So you kind of want to hold it up in the air a little bit for this. Slightly trickier. Get out of the way all a second. Or work on your Teflon sheet or something like that, and then you can peel it off. But it is worth doing both sides. Yeah. But this technique, kitchen towel, is ideal because it gets a translucency. I'm only going to do this corner because then I can hold it easily. She says, and then gets carried away. I only need a bit to go on a twin sheet, to be fair, so. Can you, I don't know how well you can see that. Can you see that it has gone, again, a bit like vellum? Now, if you find the right kitchen towel, not that I'm stood down the aisles in the supermarkets looking at the texture of the kitchen towel, but sometimes you can find ones, like the cheap ones, that just have the plain dots. When you do this with them, if you ink it up with like a green ink, it gives the most amazing snakeskin look. But actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut, I'm going to leave that so that I can, and it also gets a real sort of, almost a leatherness to it. So on that note, let's add maybe a bit of our copper to it. No, that's gold. That's silver. That's copper. So much for my trying to keep my sets separately. Why do I even try? Okay. Probably should have done the inking up at the same time. But this will work. I can just build it up if not. But the trick is to emboss both sides, which is more challenging. But we want to get this melting in. You can see the colours through. Actually, now I've put the copper on, I kind of like that texture. It does look like hammered copper now. So if you've got one that's got the boring colours in it, if you add a colour to it, you just get a really nice, almost like say the embossed copper. But I like it when you get this translucency, and it's really crunchy, and it just has a really nice look. And if you've got the cheap kitchen towel, if you scrunch it up first before you do it, it's thinner, so you get a more translucent, but it just looks like snakeskin. But actually I'm going to use that bit. Oh look, I've put them in the paint, in the glue. Don't want to do that. Right, so I'm just going to glue a bit of this on so that we've got our full panels. I know this has got embossing powder mixed in with the glue, but you know, which isn't going to stick to that now, is it? I'll get some double-sided adhesive on it. I just want to cut it down to the same size. Okay, and then we'll look at all the ones we've done, and then I've just sorry, I've gone over time. I do apologise. Really should apologise. You can tell Paul's not about. Right, let's line them all up. So, starting with our distress embossing. Then we did embossing on top of embossing, embossing underneath embossing. We did our skeleton leaf. We did our salt. We did our traditional triple embossing. We did verdigris. We did our layering it on top of black gesso. Then we did our galaxy, and finally our kitchen towel. So I'm going to get those all mounted up onto something ready for tomorrow. But look at those different techniques and those different just have a look at all the kitchen towels. It's honestly, the cheap ones are the best. So you can have so much fun with embossing powders, and look how different those techniques are. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Let's go back to that one for a second. Hang on, what am I doing? Why am I doing that one? Yes, so just don't be afraid of embossing powder, and don't just use it over a stamped image. Yes, obviously they look fabulous over a stamped image, and there's not a single crafter out there who can't remember the first time they saw embossing and how amazing it is, and it does grab most people's attention. But they can do so much more, and the chances are, you know, you could use all your existing embossing powders with these new ones as well. It doesn't have to be just these ones that I've got here. You know, just mix and match. And the thing is, some of them may not emboss as well now, and it's generally down to the pigment, not the embossing powder. If they are a bit clumpy, run them through a sieve or break it up in a pestle and mortar or something. But just have a play with them and just experiment with the sorts of things you can do. I'll obviously pop this onto YouTube, and then I will also take some photos of these tomorrow. I've got to take mother-in-law to the hospital in the morning, so it will be later on tomorrow, and get some close-up photos of these. Was it better having the camera more zoomed in? Let me know, because I'll keep the camera set at that, or maybe a little bit further out. But I just think, you know, it was this. Let's just have one last look at them. I mean, just that sapphire is just beautiful. I mean, how different do they look? You know, don't be afraid of embossing powder is basically what I'm saying. So, in the meantime, have a fabulous rest of the week and next week. I'm mainly doing Games to Hire stuff for the next few days, so loading Paul in between running to the post office with orders. But yeah, just off the van, on the van, off the van, on the van. That's what we're doing a lot of this week. And then I will see you same time next week when we're into August. So I will come up with something nice and different for August. In the meantime, get your embossing powders out, get playing with them and enjoy. So see you next week. Take care.